Hey everyone, I'm John Hanlon, joined by Joshua Hanlon, and we just got back from a Mediterranean cruise, and we wanted to talk about some of the pros and cons that we experienced and that you might experience as well, especially if you're not used to cruising, and some of the things that you can expect from going into a cruise.
That's right. So if you've watched any of our other destinations and videos, you've seen some of the European locations we've visited over the last couple of years. And so because of that, we've done several very large trips to Europe up to this point. And so when we were planning this latest trip, we thought, why not switch it up a bit, do something different that we haven't really done before, and try a Mediterranean cruise. So just to kind of lay out the groundwork and give you an idea of what we did before we started and kind of give our tips here. So we did a 2-week Mediterranean cruise in September. It started in Athens and ended in Rome, and it was through Princess Cruises. So Princess Cruises operate, I know they're famous for operating in Alaska and the Caribbean, and then they also do, ships move over to the Mediterranean. So they kind of have a number of different places around the world they operate. But we went with Princess Cruises. It was a pretty decent deal we were able to get for a 2-week cruise. So that just kind of gives you an idea of the ship we were on and what we were doing. So now we'll kind of run through some of our experiences and what we thought of the cruise. Overall, it was very fun and we enjoyed it. It was a very different experience for us for sure. Normally we are pretty rough in it, doing a lot of Airbnbs and kind of just one backpack around Europe. So it was kind of the opposite end of what we're used to there.
Yeah, so we just wanted to talk about some of the pros and the cons, and especially culturally and in terms of travel and visiting these different places. So one interesting note is if you're looking for like an enveloping experience in terms of going into a new culture, a cruise is not great for that, and that's certainly something we found. For example, most of the guests on our ship were either American or British, basically English-speaking people, the vast majority of the people on there. So again, if you're looking for that cultural experience, you're not going to get that when you're surrounded by people who are speaking the same language and have pretty similar, cultural developments and such. So it was an interesting aspect of it, but when you're staying in a country and normally in a hotel or in an Airbnb, you're surrounded by people who are speaking that language, who are obviously used to that culture, and you don't get that with a cruise ship.
Right. So if you're looking for this, really deep kind of cultural experience in a different country, cruise would probably not be for you. But if you're just looking to, have a really nice time socializing with a really nice wide variety of events, we'll talk about some of the entertainment and stuff later on the cruise. But if you're just looking to kind of socialize and meet new people from a similar background, if you're American, or on our ship there were a lot of Australians and British, that speak the same language, and you just want to meet some new people that way, then a cruise would definitely be for you, because you're all on the ship together and you have a lot of time to meet new people from that perspective. Another thing that we found during our cruise is that it can be exhausting if you have a lot of excursions in a row. So excursions are obviously a big part of cruising, where you're getting off for a day in different cities as the ship moves around and, experiencing at least a day in each place. So in our case, we had 3 days in a row at the end of our cruise where we had an excursion every day before we then got off in Rome. And that definitely starts to take a toll because of waking up early, and it can just wear you down.
Yeah, and that ties into our next point as well, that it's very frustrating since you only have one day, and sometimes it's 4, 5, 6, 7 hours if you're lucky in each location. Then you're getting up early every day because you want to make the most of that time and get off the ship as soon as possible. But then because of that, it's a pretty rigorous, and you've got to travel out to different places where you want to go from the port. So it definitely can be an exhausting experience. And again, you only have those few hours in each place. That's one of the things we really wanted to stress, was that you, instead of going to a place and staying there for several days to really experience the culture, with the cruise ship, you're obviously bouncing around every single day as a new place. So by the time you actually get to somewhere you're going, you're basically hitting the top tourist sites, and most of the people you're surrounded by are tourists and not locals anyway. So that's one of the biggest downsides that we found compared to our regular travel of staying at Airbnbs and spending multiple days in one location, is that you just have so little time to spend and experience a place. It really is it's a different world. You're mostly just going to those top 2, 3 maybe tourist sites, and then you've got to get back on the ship and leave.
Yeah, that's kind of the double-edged sword of cruising, is that you obviously have the perk of that you get to visit a whole bunch of different places, which is nice, but you're only there for, as John said, maybe 6, 7 hours at the most, some places less. Some places you might get a little more time if it's a day where they're kind of bringing new people on or whatever. You might have a little more time, but that can definitely be frustrating. Regarding the excursions as well, I would definitely recommend avoiding the kind of ship, onboard excursions if at all possible. We did a couple of those and just found that it was really frustrating because you were in this bus with a whole bunch of different people and you had this giant group that you were trying to move around. And, obviously when you're in a group that big, the group can only move as fast as kind of the slowest member is. So everything takes a lot longer. We were docked in Naples in Italy, and we're doing an onboard excursion that we thought we'd try to Pompeii. And we ended up having only like an hour and a half in Pompeii, and it just ended up being frustrating because we felt like there was so much more we wanted to see there. But because the excursion had to keep on moving, we couldn't stick around. So they also tend to cost a fair amount as well, the onboard excursions. So for those two reasons, definitely kind of look into doing your own thing, either to going to shore and getting a taxi or a train or something to where you want to go, or book through a third-party company. There are a lot of other companies that do those excursions as well that can be cheaper, and maybe just kind of your own personal van or something. Definitely also look at cruisecritic.com, which gives a ton of info on different ports and everything around the world. So that's a site I used a ton when planning our cruise to kind of figure out where we wanted to go and what we wanted to do once we got to a port.
Yeah, we should say that our points that we're talking about are definitely, if you are looking for a different experience from a cruise, you might have a very different experience. Again, we're coming from the aspect of going someplace and really trying to experience the culture, spending a while in museums, going out to the main historical sites, the main cultural sites, and that's just something you simply cannot do with a cruise. I will say, though, some ports are better for cruising than others in terms of experiencing the culture. We really enjoyed both Santorini in Greece and Gibraltar. Both of those we found that you can basically experience most of what's there in the hours that are allowed on the cruise.
Yeah, so for instance, in Santorini, we actually went ashore and rented a four-wheeler and just rode around the entire island. You can do the entire island in a day, and we actually, I think, had an hour left or something at the end of the day after riding the entire island, as well as spending a while in certain places at like the Black Sand Beach and Oyo, which is the famous village where the postcard shot kind of Santorini is, if you've ever seen that. So there are definitely some places, these really smaller cities, island like Santorini, that I think lend themselves really good to being a cruise stop, and you feel like you can get a really nice experience there in a day. But then other places, like, for instance, we went to Barcelona. Well, Barcelona has so much to do. We were able to hit a few of the highlights in a day, but certainly you could spend a whole week there or something, in Florence and Milan and some of these other places we went to as well in Italy. So a lot of the places you do end up kind of feeling frustrated that you couldn't spend more time compared to how we normally travel, where we're there for a number of days and experiencing all these things.
Yeah, and I will say, even with Santorini, if that had been our only experience of Greece, I would have been disappointed because you only have one day there. Luckily, we were able to spend several days in Athens before we got on the cruise and went to Santorini. So Santorini was a great cruise stop, and we had a lot of fun there, and it was kind of perfect for a cruise ship. But again, you're not experiencing that culture if all you did was spend half a day in Santorini. So you're basically sacrificing these authentic experiences and experiencing the culture for comfort and luxury of traveling, for the ability, the opportunity to go back to the ship and not have to move your belongings every day or every few days, to a new hotel or whatever the case may be. And with the day we got off the ship, it was kind of a perfect picture of the contrast between the cruise opportunities and the cruise life, and compared to how we normally travel. We went to an Airbnb the day we got off the ship, and it was an area with no tourists. It was a residential area in Rome, and outside of the city center. And we went to 2 restaurants. There was not a single tourist around. We were the only English-speaking people. Again, very different from what you'll experience on a cruise. We sat outside at a popular, what was clearly a popular local pizza place, where again everyone was speaking Italian. And those types of experiences, which are great and really envelop you into the culture, are simply, those are impossible on a cruise ship when you have such a limited time in each city. And then, of course, on the ship itself, you're surrounded by, at least on our ship, English-speaking people or people that are not of the country you're visiting anyway. So it's not a... So those were just kind of an interesting contrast. That's something we immediately recognized, having just come off the ship earlier in the day and then going to that Airbnb.
Mm-hmm. So while the excursions for us were definitely probably maybe the biggest downside, the fact that, you only had one day in each place, the the luxury and comfort that John mentioned is a big perk of cruising. So the things like the food and entertainment on the ship were really incredible. The food especially, I think, and this is true really, I think you'll find across pretty much all cruise lines, we were really happy with how Princess did it with both the free dining, the buffet, and some of the free restaurants by the pool, as well as the fancier dining rooms where we ended up eating a lot of our meals were very, very nice. The staff was fantastic. And the food was amazing. They would actually kind of tailor the food to where we were. So if we were in Spain, it would be something more local to Spain or Barcelona where we were. If we were in Italy, it would be something Italian. So, the food they really do an excellent job with. And then entertainment, fantastic as well. Lots of stage shows. There were a lot of the singing was really excellent. A lot of singing and music shows. They had people from the West End in London come and perform. So some really excellent entertainment throughout the whole 2 weeks we were on the cruise. So there's a lot to be said for that. If you're looking for that more maybe relaxing or much less stressful type of travel, just being able to come back to the ship, have all the food there, have all that entertainment is certainly a major perk.
Yeah, and our cruise, as Joshua mentioned, was for 2 weeks, which we found worked really well. Being people who are not familiar with cruising and who don't cruise very often or basically ever, we found 2 weeks was a really good time period to be on the ship, because by the end of the first week, you're just basically figuring everything out as far as how it all works and the restaurants and how, restaurants that need reservations and all the different places you can eat and all that stuff. By the end of the first week, we were just figuring that out. So it was great to have that second week that we could kind of relax a little more and know that we were familiar with the ship and how everything worked.
Mm-hmm. So overall, yeah, it was great for a vacation. If you, like I said, if you're looking for that more relaxation time, I think it's really great. But if you're looking for those cultural experiences, probably not the best way to travel, especially if it's kind of your first time going to Europe. I definitely would not recommend a cruise if this was your first time going to Europe. I think you're much better off choosing some interesting cities or countries to visit and getting that much more in-depth experience with the locals, and saving a cruise maybe like we did, where you've kind of experienced a lot of European culture and want to try something different. So definitely consider that if you're planning a first time trip to Europe.
Yeah, I think that's a great summary, that cruises are great for vacation, looking for that luxury experience, just relaxing, but it's really not the best way to travel. Assuming the travel for you is going and trying to experience that culture, it's really not the best way to do that. We would certainly recommend spend that money on more authentic travel. Just go to a major city and spend 3, 4, 5 days there. That's what we always try to do when we're traveling around Europe or anywhere we go. We try to go to some place and spend multiple days there to really hit up those museums, go to all the major sites, and make sure you can do that. Not just the big tourist sites, but other places maybe off the beaten path a little bit where the locals would go, or that really give you an idea of what's going on in that area.
Mm-hmm. And we'll have a more in-depth video on the particular Princess cruise ship that we were on the channel as well, so you can keep an eye out for that. And we also have some individual videos on some of the ports that we visited and some of the places we did, like the four-wheeling on Santorini that I mentioned, and kind of what that experience was like. So look for those videos as well if you want some more kind of in-depth info on some of the places we visited and the ship.
Yeah, and if you have a different perspective on anything we talked about or a different opinion, be sure to leave a comment below. We'd love to hear from you, chat with you about the different ideas that people have. But yeah, I think that's all we had. So thanks so much for watching.
See you soon.